All right, let's do this, shall we? Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining me once again for another episode of Ask Away. And I hope those of you who just watched the Stephen Stuffy premiere that finished up a few minutes ago enjoyed that. I thought that was speaking as the dude who wrote it and did half the voices and, self-praise is cheap praise, but I thought that was a pretty good Stephen Stuffy. I don't know. So thanks everybody for watching. As always, if you are joining me live in the chat and you have questions or comments, or you are planning on being generous and sharing a super chat or whatever, basically you want to do anything that you hope I will see and respond to, hold on until I get through the pre-submitted patron questions, and then I will turn my full attention to the live chat. So for now, hold on to anything that you want to make sure that I see, and then I'll get to them in a little while. So first, let's go to some of my pre-submitted patron questions, shall we? And the first question from a patron is from your friend and mine, Some Random Geek, who says, "Am I a force for good for anarchism / socialism / communism? Am I doing more harm than good with my agitate and propagate in your live chat and these mini essay questions? My intention isn't to frustrate you. I intend to bring more folks over to the left, which means over to socialism, anarchism, and communism, and far away as possible from capitalism and liberalism, period. Thinking a revolution will fix things is magical thinking. Thinking Joe Biden will change his views on Medicare for all will fix everything is magical thinking as well. It is a faith I don't have. We can't vote away capitalism or the state. We can't vote in anarchism, hence the revolution. Why spend so much time and energy on voting? But am I a good advocate for anarchism, or do I just annoy folks? I can't really say, because, I myself, I am not an anarchist, and I am not likely ever to be one, just because there are certain intellectual and philosophical barriers that I just don't think I'll ever get past with anarchism, and figuring out like how it would work and why such a system would be more stable and more equitable in the long term than what we have now. I just have certain fundamental problems with the idea of having a stateless society. That I just don't think I'm ever going to be one. But that's largely due to biases on my part, and to just sort of the way I view the world, and certain assumptions that I make. And so, no matter how good your argument for anarchism is, it probably isn't going to win me over, just because I have certain fundamental a certain fundamental opposition to the concept. I just don't think it's a workable idea in general. So it doesn't matter how great of an advocate you are for it. So I can't really judge by how you've failed to persuade me. So I don't know. I would guess, talk to your fellow anarchists and your fellow leftists and see what they think in terms of what an effective ambassador you are for those ideas. And to say like, it doesn't, I do think if anybody says, well, Joe Biden will fix everything, yeah, that's magical thinking too. But saying Joe Biden might change his mind on Medicare for all, I don't think that's magical thinking. Like I said, when I mentioned that on Monday, I don't necessarily expect that to happen. But if it did happen, it wouldn't shock me, because Biden has changed his mind on things before. And Joe Biden, for all of his many, many flaws and shortcomings as a human being and a candidate, he is someone who is willing to read the room and to change with the change, to adjust to the changing temperature of the room. And I really think if he were the president and he saw that there was widespread support for Medicare for all, or some other version of a universal health care system, I don't think that he would have some sort of ideological opposition to it. If he saw that it was gaining broad support in the party, I think he would go for it. So I don't think it's quite so. Yeah, saying Biden will fix everything, absolutely magical thinking. Saying Biden might change his mind on a matter of policy, I don't think that's magical thinking at all. I think he's changed his mind on a lot of shit, for the better, for the most part. over the years. So no, but as far as whether or not you're a good ambassador for anarchism, I'm not necessarily the person to ask. Next question is from Ayame. What are your 3 favorite cartoons from the 1990s? If you don't have any, please feel free to pick 3 from the 1980s. Actually, I did. I gave this a little bit of thought before we went on the air. And if I had to pick 3 of my favorite cartoons from the 90s, I would probably go King of the Hill, because I love King of the Hill. Maybe Freakazoid, because I used to watch Freakazoid was like appointment television for me when I was a kid and a teenager. And I know a lot of people might say Animaniacs or Pinky and the Brain if you're going to go for one of those sort of Warner Animation like comedy shows from the mid 90s, but I loved Freakazoid so much. It made me laugh. A really great episode of Freakazoid when it was really like firing on all cylinders was close to like Simpsons level for me. It made me laugh so hard. And I guess I could go easy and say number 3 would be The Simpsons, because it had its glory years in the 90s, even though I think technically it started in the late 80s, but it's sort of prime was in the 90s. But I could also say something like Batman the Animated Series, even though I think that's a little overrated by people who really love it, or Gargoyles, which I remember watching at the time. I think is actually better than Batman the Animated Series, but I haven't watched it for a while. So maybe if I watched Gargoyles again, on Disney Plus in the next few months, I might revise my opinion. But yeah, those would be some picks for me, for my favorite cartoons from the 90s. Great question. Eric Allen says, "Hi, Steve. I'm a new patron, but I have been watching your videos for several months now, and I find them quite enjoyable. I'm hoping we can all get through this pandemic together and stay healthy, but I wanted to thank you for helping that effort. And while I tend to avoid your politics videos because hearing any more about President Dumbass and the Party of Deplorables makes me angry and physically sick, I do love how you tell conservatives to fuck off. That always makes me happy. Anyway, my question is, who do you think enjoyed playing their character more? Ian McDiarmid as Sheev Palpatine or John Delancey as Q? Both seem to fully enjoy their roles and always capture any scene they're in with over-the-top, ham-fisted camp acting, and I love it. I always say I want to enjoy life as much as they seem to enjoy playing those roles. Anyways, thanks for what you do." Well, thanks for, again, a great question and a really challenging question. Because yeah, they're both very over the top, but in such different ways. You know what I mean? Like Palpatine, I think I would probably say Ian McDiarmid playing Palpatine would be the one I would pick, who seems to be having the most fun. Because Palpatine is so over the top. I mean, Q is over the top too. But Q is over the top, yet, he's very sarcastic and very quippy and very witty, and obviously John Delancey's having a great time playing him, and who wouldn't? I mean, Q would be the character you'd want to play, because it's like, you're this close to being like the Deadpool of Star Trek. I mean, if Q's the only character in Star Trek that could do a fourth wall break, and it would make perfect sense. And it wouldn't like break the premise of the show. But I would say, in terms of the actor having the most fun, I think I have to say Palpatine. There's something so exhilarating and freeing and fun about being able to play an over-the-top comic book supervillain and just camp it up and act for the cheap seats, chew the scenery, all the cliches, all the acting cliches you can think of. That looks so much fun. You can do the evil laugh. You can do all the body language. There's not a line reading that you could possibly do that would, that would be too big for that character. So I think Palpatine. I think McDiarmid playing Palpatine would be my pick. But obviously Delancey's having a great time playing Q as well. Andrew Michael, hiya Steve, hope you're staying safe on the far side of the pond. Sorry to see the USA can now claim the lofty accolades of both the most COVID-19 cases and the most deaths, more blood on damp nuts' hands. about half an hour ago, I got home from a 16-hour shift, and that has colored my mood. My job isn't really that helpful in the ongoing COVID-19 struggle. I do statistical virology analysis to find out where fatality hotspots will be, and it's horrible watching my numbers turn into actual deaths. But worse than that are the knock-on deaths. A friend of mine in the local police has seen a massive rise in domestic violence as women can't get out of the house and away from their abusers as often, even up to murder. Other crimes are rising too. Previously, I felt some optimism that this pandemic could lead to beneficial social reforms, but I'm being reminded over and over that people suck and thousands are dying in countries that have the technology and the infrastructure to prevent it. Sorry for being so negative. Sorry for venting. I just needed a friendly ear to cry into so that I can have an hour happy bouncing around with my daughter before she goes to bed. Well, it sounds like your job is really important. First of all, I know you weren't like asking for validation necessarily, but it sounds like if you're helping to track the spread of the virus and estimate where fatalities will be, I mean, that doesn't sound like it's not important to the effort. So, good for you, and thank you for doing that work. And yeah, I hadn't considered that. I had not considered things like, well, maybe domestic violence crimes would spike because people are trapped together in the house. That's yet another really disturbing corner of this that I had not even realized was there. So, yeah, you sort of dropped at the beginning saying more blood on Dampnut's hands. Yeah, and any political leader at any level, be it local, state, national, in my country or in any other country, that has been soft selling this crisis or dragging their feet on implementing measures to deal with it, and has done anything supporting a policy or failing to support a policy that has resulted in this outbreak going on for longer than it otherwise would have, or spreading to more people than it otherwise would have. Like, they all have blood on their hands. We should all be paying very, very close attention to how our elected leaders and public officials have been responding to this. And there are some who have been doing a really great job under the circumstances, or at least as good of a job as they could be doing. And there are others who are obviously doing a terrible job and are costing people's lives. And not just as a direct result of people getting sick and dying, but even stuff, sort of collateral damage, as you said, the knock-on deaths. Yeah, something we all need to be very mindful of. So I'm happy I could provide you an opportunity to vent. I hope things get better for you. I hope things get better for everybody very soon. Seems like it's still going to be a little while before things are safe, but hopefully things will be safe eventually, and it won't be too much longer. Next question is from Jose Bruna. Hi, Steve. Loving your channel, and I hope you're keeping well in such a difficult time. 2 questions. I have been watching the news conferences that have been given by the Trump administration and was wondering why the press in the room don't directly challenge the blatant lies spoken by Trump and others. They seem to passively accept the answers and not to challenge him directly. Are they scared of him? Second, how can we get Bernie supporters to vote for Biden? I'm confused why people can support Bernie in the primaries and then vote for Trump in the general. As a Brit, this is quite perplexing. Well, as an American, it's quite perplexing too, I assure you. As far as why would Bernie people vote for Trump? There's a certain segment of Bernie Sanders supporters, and I don't think this is a very large portion, and I don't even know how many of these people bothered to even vote for Bernie if they had the opportunity, but there's a certain percentage of supporters for Bernie Sanders who seem to support him for no policy reason whatsoever. They support him because he is perceived as an outsider, as anti-establishment, as someone who wants to come in and upset the established order, and people support him for that reason. And it has nothing to do with, his environmental policy, his tax policy, his advocacy for health reform or universal health care or anything like that. There's no policy basis for it at all. They just perceive Bernie Sanders as he's the guy who's going to come in and flip over the table, and that's what I want to see. And so they support him for that reason. And if that's as deep as your assessment of a candidate goes, then yeah, I suppose it does make sense that such a person could then just jump right over and vote for Trump, if indeed they vote for anybody at all. Because that's all they care about is who's the guy who's going to shake things up. It's just really, to me, a really asinine way of looking at things. So there's that. And how do we get Bernie folks to vote for Biden? I mean, for people who support Bernie, or supported Bernie for policy reasons, because they felt that he would make the best president and he would his agenda would be the most positive agenda for the country. I think the argument is relatively simple. Assuming you are able to see your way past Joe Biden's failings as a person, and specifically the sexual assault allegations made against him, which, as I've said before, if that's something if that's your reason to not vote for Biden, I respect that, and I'm not trying to change anybody's mind on that. But if you are able to sort of hold your nose, and vote for Biden, if that is even a possibility for you, but you're unsure because of his agenda, what his platform will be. Biden's platform is a hell of a lot closer to what Bernie Sanders wanted to accomplish than anything Trump would ever do. I completely reject this idea that on matters of policy, Joe Biden is not an improvement on Trump. I think that's a really, really silly thing to say. Is Joe Biden as progressive as I would like a president to be? No, of course not. Not even close. But is he preferable to Trump? He's not just marginally preferable to Trump on matters of policy. He is vastly preferable to Trump on matters of policy. And that's not necessarily a testament to how great Biden is, as it is to how awful Trump and the Republican agenda in general is. But still, the fact remains, Biden, or really any generic Democrat, even any generic establishment Democrat on paper, is better than Trump or any Republican would be. So if you care about policy, I mean, go to Biden's website, look at the platform, look at what he wants to accomplish, listen to his speeches, listen to what he and Bernie Sanders have said about each other and to each other since Sanders dropped out and endorsed him, and just think about if that's really what is influencing your decision. Clearly, Biden's the guy you have to vote for if you are capable of doing that. Why don't reporters challenge Trump in the news conferences? I wish they would do more of that too. I noticed them doing it a little bit more lately, and I haven't watched a full one of those. I watch clips, and I follow a couple people on Twitter who post updates and clips and stuff from the news conferences, and I sort of try to keep up with it that way. But I can't sit down and watch one of those things from start to finish. I would be I would be banging my head against the desk if I did that. But I have noticed reporters challenging him a little bit more, but obviously I wish that they would challenge him even more than they do. And what I really wish they would do is when they ask a question of Dr. Fauci, for example, or some other expert that is joining Trump for one of these press conferences, when they ask the expert a question and then Trump chimes in, I wish they would just say, "Hey, we weren't asking you." We want to hear what the expert says. You clearly know nothing about this, and you're treating this like a re-election rally. So just you stand over there, and we want to talk to the expert because this is a life and death situation. I wish there was a little bit more of that. I don't expect that to ever happen. The mainstream media, unfortunately, even though it has found a little bit of guts in the last few weeks, it still is nowhere near as tough as it needs to be on Trump, especially. But yeah, I'm with you. I wish they stood up to him a lot more than they are doing, even though they are doing it a lot more now than they were previously. Next question is from Dr. Babylon. Today, I'd like to share my theory for why communism so often turns authoritarianism. To begin with, there's the recurring problem of the communist preference for revolution manifesting as anti-democratic. In Marxist theory, there's the concept of false consciousness, which basically means that if workers don't agree with communists and don't see themselves and their problems the same way communists do, that means they've been brainwashed by capitalists. This idea is used to explain why the majority of workers consistently fail to play their allotted role of uniting in unilateral support of a communist revolution. It's used to explain away why communists and other socialists lose elections or aren't winning fast enough, and to dismiss anti-communism as illegitimate. Another subtler problem is that by being overly dogmatic and insisting on speaking in jargon, communists can isolate themselves from the working class and public at large, increasing the likelihood that any successful takeover will result in a dictatorship of some sort. Finally, there's the sort of communism that is entirely collectivistic, emphasizing the supposed common good over individual freedom, and often communists view individualism with disdain. Every society needs a mixture of collectivism in order for people to survive, and individualism to be a place worth surviving in. Well, I definitely agree with that last bit. I am, I guess I feel like saying, thank you for sharing your TED Talk with us. I agree with the last point that I think I sort of try to visualize it as a slider switch, and on one extreme is collectivism, or you might say things done for the common good, and then on the other end of the spectrum is individual rights, or things that are good for a single citizen. And it can't be one or the other. To have a strong society, the slider has to be somewhere in the middle. And depending on the given circumstance, you have to adjust it. There may be times when you have to make a decision based on what is good for the great majority of people, or people in general. And then there may be times where you have to err on the side of individual liberty. And figuring out when to do that and when that is the right thing is one of the challenges of being a representative in a democracy, one of the challenges of being a leader, one of the challenges of being a legislator, whatever, an administrator, an executive. So yeah, but as for the rest of it, like I accept that as your perspective. I'm sure the communists and anarchists and other leftists in the live chat or otherwise who would see this would have their own perspective on that, and would not necessarily agree with everything you said. Although the bit about talking too much in jargon seems like, I mean, if you're talking in such a way that you are creating a barrier between people, making it more difficult for people who are not initiated to access your ideas and engage with them and understand what it is you want to do and why that would be a good idea, then yeah, I think that could be a good point too. But I don't know. So, but thank you for sharing your perspective with the rest of us. I'm sure some people agree with it, and there are some people who are like, fuck that guy, he doesn't know what he's talking about. So welcome to the internet, I guess. But anyway, next question is from David Colby. Ever seen those Facebook poll things where it's like, which of these fictional objects would you prefer to have? And the choice is like Thor's hammer, a lightsaber, a proton pack from the Ghostbusters, and the entire fucking USS Enterprise D. And there are people who don't pick a goddamn Galaxy class. It's not just a single lightsaber, it's multiple intricate technological components, each of which would completely revolutionize human life. Not even replicators, just the materials technology used to construct the hull would completely change our lives. And there are still people who pick Thor's hammer, a mystical weapon they can't even use. So this leads to my question. If you were given direct control of an uncrewed Galaxy Class Starship that was parked in orbit around Earth, meaning the computer follows your orders to the best of its abilities, what would you do with it? Burn your name into the White House lawn, beam Trump's toupee off his head during a speech, replicate COVID-19 vaccinations using the ship's historical database, blow up Olympus Mons with some photon torpedoes? I love how I have a Galaxy Class Starship, and the only option you give me in your question that involves actual space travel is flying it to Mars and blowing up Olympus Mons for some reason. It would be nice to take a trip to Mars, though, so maybe I would take that option, But you know what I would do? Speaking of like beaming Trump's toupee into space or whatever, yeah, obviously if the medical database or the technology in sickbay could be used to help, cure disease or treat the COVID-19 pandemic or any other disease that is afflicting people that could be treated effectively with that technology, that would be a great thing to do with it, sure. Also, maybe use the scanners, use the onboard sensors to tap into Trump's private meetings and record what he's saying to people behind closed doors, and then maybe accidentally send that to the Washington Post, so everybody can see what he's saying in private. And what those meetings are really like. Because, we know what those meetings are like because there are anonymous sources that tell us. But then Trump can always have deniability. He can always say, oh, it's an anonymous source. They could, you don't know who that is. They're just making stuff up, But if you could, with your super advanced Starfleet sensor technology, if you could eavesdrop on what he's saying and then pass that directly on to the press or directly in front of the people, then he can't deny that now. I guess he could say maybe it was deep faked as soon as one of the people under 50 in his administration tells him what a deep fake is and then explains the non-porn related uses it could have. Then maybe he could say that, but I think it would be a lot more difficult for him to deny. So maybe I would do that. Next question is from Isaiah Taylor. So, Steve, I just made a rather abrupt and possibly momentous decision. I just decided to possibly enlist in the United States Air Force. However, this is solely for career building only. I want to use the resources of the Air Force to further my career at NASA for the supposed upcoming Artemis missions to the moon, and possibly the Air Force can pay for me to attend school to acquire a STEM master's degree to become an astronaut. I completely understand that this could be a dry well, but as you know, living in Tallahassee, I have nothing here for me, and I feel left out as a high-functioning person with autism over the much more deserving ones who are either much more attractive, i.e. a blonde model with autism, or someone who is more disabled. I feel like I need to take charge of my own situation and improve myself. Don't worry, I'm still an atheist and highly critical of America, but I can put that aside for now just to achieve my goal. Look at it this way. The military is socialism, and I will get to travel and do college for free. Historically, some of my friends want me to join so that I can feel proud or find a Korean girlfriend. I was into Asian girls at one point in my life. I've had misgivings about military service since, for one, my dad came back from the Gulf War pretty fucked up and treated me like shit. And the other reason was society throwing away more unwanted or undesirable people, such as drifters, addicts, petty criminals, rebels, and rejects to go over and get discipline. I don't know, but I'm down to my last straw. Once the virus is over and America gets back to normal. By the way, I have told my conservative friends not to display flags, ribbons, or anything else in honor of my service. Glad I could share this with you, and I can't wait to once again be a part of the Patreon Hangout on the 27th. Well, yeah, I hope you can make it to the next Patreon Hangout as well, because we really enjoyed having you last time. If this is what you want, if you do end up doing this, if you do end up actually joining the Air Force, and that's what you want to do, I'm certainly not going to give you a hard time about it. I would just say I hope that you're safe. If you end up joining and you end up being deployed to some dangerous part of the world, I hope that you're safe, and I hope that you get what you want to get out of it. I know a lot of people who have joined the military for career-related reasons. I know there's a friend of mine. We're not like super close friends, but someone that I've known for a few years who, if you didn't know her well enough, you would never really assume that she was in the military, but she's in the Army. I think she's in the Army Reserves. And that was totally a career thing. That was to get her education and for extra money, and for career opportunities. Like, that was the only reason she joined. And there are a lot of people that do that. Unfortunately, military recruiters exploit that. They take advantage of people who don't have other career opportunities and say, hey, come join the military, kid. And I feel like that's a deplorable situation. But if you have decided that that's your best option and you go ahead and do that, all I'm going to say is good luck, and I hope it turns out well. And like I say, I hope you're safe, and I hope you learn what you need to learn and you get the education that you want to get. And when you emerge on the other side of it, it puts you that much closer to where you really want to be. That's all I would say to you. And, obviously, best of luck. Yeah. If I was going to join the military, I think I would probably want to join the Air Force too. I mean, come on. It has the coolest name, like the Air Force, right? But yeah. So I think it's terrific if that's what you want to do. Good luck. Marai Ziller. Hey, Steve. Watching the problems facing the U.S. politically, I'd argue that the horrific informal two-party system, which isn't actually a formal part of the Constitution, but is practically treated as such in the U.S. by political institutions and the media, desperately needs ripping open. Unfortunately, the only other parties with any kind of recognition are the Libertarians, the less said the better, and the Greens, who, unlike Green parties elsewhere, have an overwhelming penchant for promoting and giving oxygen to pseudoscience and anti-science ideas and conspiracy theories. Can you see a viable way through this? Are the Greens in the U.S. a party that can be reformed and given a proper political strategy to make them pry the two-party system open? Ditch the conspiracy and anti-science brigade, focus on local and state offices hard and build a strong party presence, and then on to congressional seats instead of wasting resources and energy on presidential before they're even ready to be a viable choice. I understand that will take a lot of time and a total overhaul of the U.S. Green Party and the leadership in general. Well, yeah, but I think you kind of laid it out in your question is what they need to do. Yes, the Green Party or any other minor party could grow and be developed into something that could sort of wedge itself into the current two-party system and be a viable third option if they did what you suggest in your question and start local, start fundraising local, start grassroots, work your way up into local governments across the country. And then up into the state level, create a presence in state legislatures and city councils and things like that, and build up. The problem is, and obviously, yeah, ditch the conspiracy theories, the pseudoscience, the stunt candidates, all of that stuff that the Green Party unfortunately has been has sort of tended to embrace for most of its history. Yeah. But, minor parties in the U.S. have all kind of done that, at least in the modern era. The Libertarians, the Reform Party, the Green Party, the Constitution Party, they all seem to want to start with, let's run for president. And, even if one of them did somehow magically win the presidency, what are they going to accomplish when they have zero base of support in Congress? If you are a member of the Green Party and you get elected president and there are no Green Party members in the United States Congress, then who are your allies? Like, what, especially if you've run an outsider candidacy and part of your platform is probably, don't trust the Democrats, don't trust the Republicans, they're both no good. So, are you going to say, well, but I'm a Green Party candidate, so I'm more progressive than I am conservative, so I'm going to go to the Democrats with my hat in my hand and say, please, I didn't mean that shit. I was just saying stuff to get elected. Please, can we be friends now? It's just, you want to start small and build up a base nationwide so eventually you get to a point where you can run viable candidates for national offices. That would be the way to go. Are they going to do that? Probably not. History says no, that they're not going to do that, but that's the way they would have to do it, sure. Next question is from Francois Lacombe. Hi, Steve. Any news about that YouTube Silver Play button? I'm asking because I heard that getting that award is not automatic. There's a setting on your channel that has to be set to true or something like that. Here's the source for that information. It's in the first 2 minutes of this video. It doesn't say where that setting is, but apparently it's a thing that exists. Just wanted to give you a heads up about that. Thank you, Francois. I have not heard anything about the Silver Play button, and I have not, I looked into what you were talking about and what the video said. I have not received the notification that you're supposed to get when it's time to claim your reward. So I don't know if I'm just going to be one of those channels that doesn't get it, or if they're like really, really far behind and they just haven't gotten around to sending me the notification yet, or what. I don't know. I haven't heard anything about it since I crossed 100,000, and I haven't really thought that much about it because I've been too busy actually making videos. I mean, if I got one, it would be really nice. I would like to have it, but it's not something that, unless I'm reminded of it for some reason, it's not really something that I think about all that much. But if I hear any news about it, or if I get one, or find out that, I'm going to get one, obviously I'll make an announcement and let everybody know, because I'm sure a lot of you would like to see it if I do end up getting the little silver play button. But no, I haven't heard anything new about it, and it's not really something that I spend a lot of time thinking about. But thank you for asking, and thank you for the information. Andrew C. Hawkins asks, how about a nice non-political question? What's your favorite Dale Cooper moment in all of the Twin Peaks saga? Oh, man. Oh, boy, that's a tough one. I like the bit in, I think it's in the first season of the original show, when they're out in the woods and he's doing that bit where he's trying to figure out who killed Laura Palmer, and he has a list of the likely suspects on a blackboard out in the woods, and he's throwing stones at a glass bottle, and at every time he throws the stone, he whispers the name of the suspect into the stone and then throws it, and it's supposed to be like this spiritual ritual that if the stone goes in the bottle, then that means that person is a good bet to have committed the crime or whatever. I thought that was peak Cooper. But also, I have to say, in the new season, in the revival, when Cooper finally comes back to himself, when he wakes up near the end and he's Cooper again, and he's in the hospital, and he puts the suit back on, and somebody in his hospital room, I forget who, somebody in his hospital room says, well, should we call the FBI? And Cooper looks at him and he says, I am the FBI. Oh, God, that's such a great moment. That might be my favorite. Because it was so, like, you've waited for this. I think that was like the second to last or third to last episode of the entire season. So you've waited this entire season waiting for coming back, like, all the way as Cooper. And he's back. He's Cooper again. And he's got the big, proud, like, confident smile on his face, and he's back in the suit. The hair's back where, in Cooper style. And he says, I am the FBI. Oh, God, I love it. So that might be my favorite. Ahoy, Erno, during Facepalm 5, your call to vote for Biden is incomplete. Yes, he's the worst candidate the Democratic Party has fielded in a very long time, but he's still less evil than Trump. Luckily, democracy doesn't stop at the ballot. Biden needs a women's march almost as much as Trump. He needs to be held accountable for every step he makes. He needs people writing letters and demanding health care, because in merely voting for the lesser of two evils, and yes, they're both evil when you're on the left politically, just doesn't cut it. With enough pressure, it is possible to pull a Democratic Senate and president towards the center. This is not possible with the current state of the Republican Party. Not a question, just advice. Write letters and emails, call, protest, demand no less than everything. Perform your democratic duties. I will second that wholeheartedly. I will second that absolutely wholeheartedly. I think I said something similar to that on the Facepalm 5 on the after show on Monday. That voting is essential. If you are registered to vote in the United States and you are able to vote, please do so. I urge you to do so. And for the presidential election, as I've said, if you're capable of doing so, I urge you to vote for Joe Biden, who will be the Democratic nominee. And vote for the most progressive candidate that has a realistic shot to win on the ballot in every race down the ballot, not just for president. But voting is the minimum. You do need to do more, even if you're not even, and that's before you even get to things like direct action or community organizing or protest, things like that. Like even just within engaging with the political system, engaging with the government, there are things beyond just voting that you can do, like contact your representatives. Like call your congressman, write letters, go to town meetings. If your member of Congress has a town meeting in your district, go ask a question, So I agree with you completely. Please please do that as well as vote. Absolutely. Absolutely. I second that completely. Question from Mel. Hi, Steve. Maybe you already answered this question before, but I'd like to know if there are any female, queer, or non-binary atheists, agnostics that are actively taking part in the discussion, like you and, for example, PZ Myers are doing. Looking forward to the Patreon hangout. Stay safe. Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. And there's my friend Christy Winters. There's Marissa McCool, who hosts several really awesome podcasts. There's Callie Wright, who hosts an awesome podcast. Let's see, Ari Stillman, again, great podcaster. Sikavu Hutchinson, who is a fantastic writer and is very active in the American Humanist Association and has organized the social justice, the secular social justice conference in the past. So, I mean, yeah, there are a ton of really, really great activists and podcasters and voices in the atheist, agnostic, skeptical community who are women or people of color or, trans people or non-binary people that definitely deserve your attention. And yeah, the ones that I just named off the top of my head are the ones that are the most known to me, and most of them are personal friends of mine, or at least people that I know personally to one degree or another. But yeah, there are a lot of voices that are not cis hetero white men like myself and the great PZ Myers that deserve a lot more attention than they get. And actually, a good source for that is if you pay attention to Skepticon. Skepticon is of all the major atheist skeptic events, Skepticon does the most in terms of trying to put a diverse field of people, forward. So going to Skepticon and seeing like who they're, I think, and because of COVID, I think this year they've decided Skepticon is going to be like an online convention instead of doing it live in person in St. Louis. But yeah, the Skepticon is a great resource for looking at a more diverse group of voices in the skeptic community besides dipshits like this. So I would recommend that if you're looking for just one place to sort of look around and try to discover some new people. But yeah, and the people I named as well are good places to start to, because they're all really terrific people. And there's a bunch of people that I probably should have thought of and named just now that I couldn't think of. So I apologize to them. Matthew Royker, how is the status on switching to ranked choice voting for the Trek Actually topics? Well, right now it's the same as it was the last time I talked about it, because I haven't really done anything to it other than look up a couple of online. There's one or two online polling websites that allow ranked choice voting, and I suppose what I could do is just, instead of using the native poll feature on Patreon, I could just link to one of those next time I do a poll. So I'll write myself a note, and maybe next, because next week will be when the next poll goes up. So your question is very well timed. Maybe if I remember, I'll put up the next poll on one of those websites instead of directly on the Patreon page, and see if we can do ranked choice voting for it and see how people like it and if it makes any difference in the results, stuff like that. But yeah, thank you for the reminder. At the moment, the status is unchanged, but we'll see if I can do something about that coming up here soon. Andrew Michael, Biden is shite, but come on. If it was a vote between Trump and Hitler, you'd still have to weigh up the relative pros and cons. Question. The USA has as many political parties as the UK, but I've never heard of a state being anything other than red or blue. We do get the odd Green Party or Liberal Democrat representative in Parliament. Have you had any third-party candidates that have ever had a chance? Not really. No, the most prominent third party candidate, there have been I'll rephrase. There have been occasionally, I think maybe once or twice ever, there have been Green Party members or maybe a Reform Party member that got elected to Congress, that got elected to the House of Representatives, but they didn't stick around real long. And of course, there have been the most prominent state governor was probably Jesse Ventura, who was elected governor of Minnesota as a member of the Reform Party once upon a time. Back in like 98, I think is when he was elected. So yeah, every once in a while it happens at the state or local level, or the level of a congressional district. But in terms of presidential candidates, the most prominent third-party presidential candidates have all proven to be spoilers, at least in the modern era, ever since the advent of something that is recognizable as our modern two-party system. There have been a handful of third-party candidates like Teddy Roosevelt, I think in 1916. Yeah, I think Roosevelt ran as a third-party candidate in the Bull Moose Party in 1916, and was basically a spoiler. George Wallace ran as an independent in 68, I think. Was it 64 or 68? Again, same deal. And Ross Perot in the 90s and Ralph Nader in 2000. They never really they never have an actual shot at winning the election, but occasionally you see one that gets enough support that they can affect the outcome by taking votes away from one candidate or the other in the two major parties. But no, in terms of third party candidates that have a realistic shot at winning the presidency, no, that hasn't happened in my lifetime or really in the last century or so, if not longer. Joe McClory, I am torn about supporting Joe Biden. Not about voting for him. I live in Wisconsin, and well, I believe firmly in harm reduction, and I will be going to vote in the election for the removal of the shit stain on Wisconsin that is Ron Johnson. That being said, I get why people wouldn't want to vote for him, and I understand the idea of trying to get a protest vote going if you could somehow make people aware you are doing it as a group and to try to drive the Democratic Party to the left. On that note, I have come up with an idea and want your input on it, asking progressives in states that are not up for grabs to vote not for Biden for me in California, New York, Hawaii, Texas, and Alabama. There is no way voting for Biden or not doing so will matter unless a bunch of them unless a bunch of them do it in a way that makes the Democratic Party notice, like writing in Sanders or a lost progressive vote, or just leaving President blank while voting blue the rest of the way down the ballot and making a public campaign about it. So when Biden takes a hit in states that don't matter because of the Electoral College, maybe the DNC will be more likely to give us a seat at the table for fear next time they will just lose our votes in places that do matter. Is this a good idea, or is it still too dangerous or just doomed to fail, even if the risk is low of it doing damage to the chance of booting Trump? It's a good idea in theory, but I don't know if it'll, I mean, it rests on getting enough people to do it so that the Democrats take notice. And then even if you get that accomplished, you also are hoping that the Democratic Party establishment will take the desired lesson from it. And I think it's knowing how the mainstream Democratic Party tends to think, it's just as likely that they would look at that and say, those ungrateful. See, this is why you can't count. This is why it makes no sense to court progressives, because they would rather throw their votes away in these childish protests than vote for the best available candidate. I feel like it might just reaffirm a lot of the reasons that mainstream establishment Democrats have already for not thinking it's worth putting forth a lot of effort to court really progressive voters, so yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a good idea in theory, and I like the idea of tailoring it so that it has the least chance of actually helping Trump. You do it in states where it wouldn't hurt Biden anyway, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like even if you were able to accomplish it by making it a national campaign and getting enough people to do it that it actually got attention, you're betting on the Democratic Party leadership taking the proper lesson from it, and that's a pretty big gamble, knowing the history of the party and how obtuse the party often is. Especially when it comes to its own voters, strangely enough. General Contact Unit Problem Child. We support a left-leaning guy. He's not that left-wing because we're socialists in a neoliberal era. So we know not to be too ambitious. Our candidate does well in the beginning, but ultimately institutional barriers and party insiders conspiring against him result in him losing, and instead, a centrist candidate takes the nomination. The centrists attempt to reassure us by saying that at least we can hope to influence the centrist candidate to do good things, whereas there's no hope of that with the current monster in power. We point out to the centrists that the barriers that prevented our candidate from getting the nomination also disincentivize any centrist candidate from feeling they need to listen to us. The centrists get mad at us. They accuse us of being conspiracy theorists for even claiming those barriers exist. They tell us we're short-sighted, immature idealists for even considering not supporting their centrist candidate. Don't we understand that getting a fascist out of office has to take precedent over whatever political project we have in mind? We tell them they're the short-sighted ones. The party has been drifting right for the better part of a half century. If we let them think they can have our vote no matter what, they have no incentive to stop the trend. Even if our party displaces the other party in its current form, all that means is we might be a bit nicer to LGBTQ people in the meantime until the world burns. Steve, that's not what I believe, though I am sympathetic to such thinking, but I wanted to lay out my understanding of the Bernie or bust mindset so I could get your response to it. I think that's a fair, I think that is a fair assessment of the situation. I do think that the Democratic Party establishment is I'll be very charitable and say that the party establishment is extremely reluctant to embrace and support candidates that it feels are too progressive, right? And yes, they do erect certain institutional barriers that make it more difficult for progressive candidates to flourish as opposed to centrist candidates. And I think what you're saying is true, but the fact remains that if there was a groundswell of popular support within the Democratic Party for progressive candidates, and the Democratic Party continues to hold nominating contests that are public elections, then there's a limited amount of influence the party has over who gets nominated for what, unless they want to just come out and just start outright rigging shit or outright ignoring the results of primary elections. In other words, even with the institutional barriers that exist, if more people had turned out this year to vote for Bernie Sanders than for Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders would have been the Democratic nominee. And the truth is, a lot of people, just more people voted for Biden than for Bernie. And yeah, I think some of that is attributed to the fact that the party apparatus does tend to favor less, progressive candidates, especially for high offices. But it really wasn't even that close. I mean, there were states where Bernie won and won handily, and there were many states where Biden won and won handily. I mean, if you add it all up and you look at the vote totals and you look at the delegate totals, Biden won relatively easily, and Hillary Clinton won for all the drama and all of the copy that was printed in 2016 about Hillary versus Bernie. Ultimately, Hillary Clinton won the nomination relatively easily. It was not as much of a horse race as people thought it was. It was a lot closer than it had been in a lot of other elections in the past. It was not Hillary winning the nomination was not, she didn't get to just walk away with it. Bernie did present some challenge, but it was not like, it was not a nail biter. It didn't come down to the wire, and it didn't come down to the wire this time either. So, if there's not enough popular support, if the votes aren't there, if people don't turn out to the election and vote for the progressive candidates, then trying to drag the party to the left, you can't do that. I agree, we should be running progressive candidates, but if they're not winning the elections, then our options are limited to, well, we have to vote for the centrist candidate that they do nominate, and then we have to try and drag that candidate to the left. And yeah, I mean, it is a shitty situation, but if progressives aren't winning elections, then that's the situation. And if Bernie Sanders can't win the Democratic Party nomination, then we have to do the best we can with what we have, you know? And I'm not convinced that the institutional advantages that someone like Biden has are enough to completely account for how easily he won the election. You know, I think that does play a role, but I don't think that you can just look at Joe Biden and say, well, he won because the party was in the tank for him. I don't think that's it. I think for whatever reason, he was the candidate within the Democratic voting base that got, by a healthy margin, got the most support. And we can talk about why that is, or talk about how we wish that had not been the case. Sure. But that's what happened, you know? So, I mean, reforming the Democratic Party in terms of how it holds primaries, in terms of how it treats progressive candidates, in terms of how it gatekeeps, like, I agree with all of that. I do think that needs to happen. But that won't automatically mean that we start electing radical leftists. That's not the way it would work. John Brockman. So, Steve, you're a big fan of Superman, the Boy Scout, America's Moses, the original flying brick. But what about Lex Luthor? Isn't it unethical to imply that he's the exception, that he's the only unethical billionaire? Does going after Superman make him that much worse than the others? What's one more victim compared to the millions of lives he and his fellows are already ruining? Good question, but you know, I feel like the idea that Lex as the evil billionaire is somehow an exception to the rule isn't, I don't know if that's what was in. Maybe that's how it's become. That's how the character has evolved. But I'm pretty sure when John Byrne introduced the rich billionaire version of Lex in the 80s, because remember, throughout the Golden and Silver Age, Lex was not evil rich guy. Lex was mad scientist. And he didn't become evil rich guy until the 80s when John Byrne rebooted the Superman line, and he decided that Superman's arch nemesis in the 1980s, the decade of greed, where Donald Trump first rose to prominence, that the arch enemy of Superman should be not a mad scientist, but a billionaire industrialist who cares more about money than he cares about people, and is willing to use his wealth and his power to, you know, to commit great evil on the world and to try and destroy Superman. And so I don't think necessarily the idea was that Lex was supposed to be this uniquely bad billionaire. I think Lex was meant to be the stand-in for industrialists, to be the stand-in for the sort of robber baron type people that were coming back to prominence in the 1980s. And not to say like, well, there's Lex, he's the only evil rich guy, but to say there's Lex and that character is a representative of all the evil rich guys. And the fact that he is now Superman's arch nemesis is the comic book's way of saying this is a problem. Like, people like this are a problem for our society. If Superman is the idol that we should all aspire to be, if he's the role model that we should all want to be like, then Lex Luthor is the opposite of that. And what is Lex? He's a billionaire industrialist with no moral compass. So I think it depends on how you look at it. If you look at Lex as, well, oh, an evil rich guy as opposed to all the other rich guys, then yeah, I see your point. But if you look at Lex as a representative of all the evil rich guys in reality, then I think you get closer to the point that, and again, maybe I'm being a little presumptuous here, or I'm just reading into it I'm bringing more to it than is actually there. But I think that was one of the main reasons why John Byrne revamped Lex in that way, because he wanted to reflect that part of the 1980s and the problems associated with people like Lex Luthor in our actual society. Adam Augusto, I just wanted to pipe in a defense of the Never Biden people and also make a case for them to vote for this guy anyway if he makes it to November. I don't think he will, but that's another conversation. And you can feel free to use that argument to your heart's content. In order to defend a Never Biden voter, we first have to establish what the current president really is. Donald Trump is the political equivalent of Ric Flair. Every day he gets in front of that podium, talks about how he's the greatest ever, deflects any question or criticism that might make him seem weak, takes a confrontational tone with his interviewers, trashes his enemies, and then does a victory lap on Twitter. He lives to be president another day. Eat it, America. But what makes Donald Trump so terrible in the eyes of the establishment isn't that he's morally bankrupt, corrupt, greedy, or bigoted. It's that he's indiscreet. There's nothing that Donald Trump has done with his time in office that hasn't been done by every other establishment politician in my lifetime. And that is why they insist that this man must be defeated. Donald Trump's real sin is being a bumbling moron who accidentally lifted the veil on the kind of corruption that is standard practice in Washington among Democrats and Republicans alike. And if you're a Never Biden voter, no one is going to gaslight you into seeing something else. And that's the problem with the blue no matter who voters. They're trying to make an argument based on what the media, which loves Donald Trump, presents to us as evidence of his incompetence and corruption, to which the very valid reply is, what the hell is the difference? Here's the difference. The Nazis love Donald Trump. Do you hate Nazis? Vote against whomever they love, plain and simple. Get the Nazi pinup boy out of office and just keep fighting. If you're true left, you're not afraid of a little work. And Steve, my sincere apologies for the length of this letter. Abridge or summarize as you wish. And I did abridge quite viciously. I hope my abridgment was okay, because it was really long. I tried to cut it down as much as I could. Since everybody ignores the please make your question as concise as possible request in my when I post when I put up the article or the post for to call for patron questions, I say please make the questions as concise as possible, and you keep writing me books, so I don't know what to do. But yeah, thank you, and I do think you make a good point, and yeah, I mean. It is a simple argument, but when you're talking about making a lesser of two evils decision, voting for the candidate voting against the candidate that the Nazis like, I mean, that's not nothing. If you have two candidates and one of them is like the favorite president ever of neo-Nazis, vote for the other guy. You don't want the neo-Nazis' favorite guy to win, do you? Vote for the other guy. And maybe you say, oh, that's a little simplistic. Do you want the neo-Nazi guy to get in again? I mean, because that's going to happen. If the other guy doesn't win, the neo-Nazi guy wins. So that's going to happen if the other guy doesn't win. So, you know, that's the situation. But yeah, I think that's very well put. John Burnsy. Hey, Steve. So, you know how the mirror universe is in Star Trek TOS and TNG and DS9 and... Anyway, in dark matter, there is also another universe, and travel is possible between the two. And I didn't really study this concept until I found out that there's a guest star who's a veteran actor from the Star Trek universe. It took me a little while to realize this, but this actor also had facial hair. Okay, I can be kind of thick sometimes. I don't know if Joe Malazzi, the producer, who was a producer in the Stargate franchise, is sticking it to Star Trek or just doing this tongue-in-cheek, but it's an interesting question to think of what the opposite universe of the dark matter one is. Or, as Counselor Troy once said, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. No, I think that's probably an inside joke. Ever since the Mirror Mirror episode of Classic Trek, anytime anyone does, you know, an evil twin or an alternate universe or a parallel universe version of a character or something, that's a very common little Easter egg to throw in. One of the characters will have a goatee or some kind of prominent facial hair as sort of a shout out to Mirror Universe Spock with the goatee. Like it's probably intentional. I've never seen the show. I don't know specifically what you're talking about. But yeah, if you are watching a show and there's a plot where there's an alternate universe version of a character, and that alternate universe version has facial hair, and the prime version of the character is clean shaven, that's probably a reference to Star Trek and Mirror Mirror. Not definite. It could be just a coincidence, but you're not off base to assume that that's some kind of a reference. I think that's a pretty good bet. Joe Mitchell, Jedi, Sith, or Rogue, Gray, Dark Jedi? I lumped the last three into the same category. I would say I'm a Jedi. I would rather be a Jedi. I would rather root for the Jedi. I mean, obviously the Jedi have problems. For one thing, they're boring motherfuckers, as glimpsed in the prequel trilogy. Like, I really think one of the main problems with those movies is they spend so much time with the Jedi, and it turns out the Jedi are the most boring motherfuckers in the galaxy. Oh my God. Did any of them have a personality? Like, You had Samuel L. Jackson, and he just fucking sat there and just droned on reading lines in this dull, lifeless monotone for 3 movies. What the fuck? But the Sith are evil, so, you know, I'll go with the Jedi. And the dark gray rogue Jedi, I don't pick up on that reference. Is that like an expanded universe thing? Because I don't remember seeing anything about that in the movies. And that's literally, I watched the movies and The Mandalorian, and that's it. I've never read the novels. I've never read the comics. I've never played the video games. Haven't watched any of the animated stuff. So if that's something from that, I can't really comment on it because I don't know. So I'll have to go between Jedi and Sith, and I'll go Jedi. Sean Hartley. Hey, Steve, and everyone else here. I hope a lot of you are keeping well. I recently watched a show where someone was asked whether they would go back or forwards in time if they had access to a time machine. Their answer was back in time. I facepalm every time I hear that. It has already happened. It is in the history books and in the stories of our elders. The future is something we don't know anything about yet. Why wouldn't you choose to go to the future and learn everything you could about what will happen? Maybe I'm just being ridiculous with an overreaction to a fictional event. What would you do and why? And do you have any similar thoughts about that? Also, do you think that if humanity will ever invent a time machine, we should have found out about it already if people are so focused on going back in time? Yeah, that's sort of like the time travel version of the Drake equation, right? For space travel. Like if the universe really is as full of intelligent species as we might assume it is, given how large it is, and now how we've discovered, how common exoplanets are, and even Earth-like exoplanets. If life is that common, why have we never heard from another intelligent species ever in our entire history? And the time travel version of that is, well, if time travel is invented in the future, why haven't we encountered any time travelers in the past? And so, yeah. But, I mean, I do get the appeal of traveling to the past. We are naturally, I think, many of us, myself included, are very nostalgic creatures. And the promise of being able to jump into a machine and travel to the past is very, very attractive on an emotional level, and also a scholarly level, to be able to say, you can go back and study the past firsthand and learn how things actually were instead of having to rely on sources and things like that. But on a purely emotional level, you invent a time machine. Now suddenly the past, which is completely lost to us. The past, yes, it already happened, but that's the tragedy of it. The past is gone. And it still calls to us. And if we can get into a time machine and go back and revisit the past, I completely get why people would want to do that. I would want to do that too. But I would like to think that I would be more interested in visiting the future. I mean, I think that's the nobler ambition, to say, I want to go to the future and I want to see what lies ahead. I want to see where we're going from here. I want to know what's going to happen. I feel like that's the nobler ambition. So I would like to think that I would want to take the time machine into the future, were such a thing possible. But who knows? I might take it into the past. I'm just as sentimental as the next person. Matthew Zeidman, hi Steve. Do you think the McMahons will ever be held accountable for skirting or breaking the law? It seems that even under Democratic administrations, no one has had the appetite to challenge their ridiculous classification of their wrestlers as independent contractors. Additionally, with the definition of bribery so narrowly defined by the courts, it seems Linda McMahon can pay her way into government office or get her business exempted from pandemic safety measures with impunity. It sure does, doesn't it? It does seem like you can just bribe the governor of Florida and he'll come out like the next day and be like, essential business. No. I would love to see something like that happen. And I'm glad you specified the exploitation of wrestlers by treating them as full employees, but technically classifying them as independent contractors, so you don't have to give them health insurance or employment benefits. I would love for the government to put a stop to that, because that is a crime. That should be a crime. And the WWE, the worst part of it is that now the WWE is a multi-billion-dollar company and could afford to treat, like, it's not even a matter of, because, you know, it started out as, well, you know, back in the day, you have a wrestling company and it's basically a small business. It's like a regional promotion, runs a couple of shows a month, or, you know, has a traveling circuit where it goes to the same towns every month. And there's a small roster of guys. Yeah, it makes money and people can make a living, but you don't have the resources to pay for health insurance or to pay for benefits or sick leave or whatever. So you pay people on a per night basis. And if they can afford, if they're able to go work for somebody else, they can go work for somebody else too, as long as their dates don't conflict with what they've already promised to work for you. And that's just the way it was. But when you take that same mentality and then you apply it to a multi-billion-dollar corporation that could easily afford to just treat the wrestlers as full-time contracted employees and give them health benefits and give them other employee benefits, and they just don't because the people that run it are greedy assholes. Yeah, I would love to see the government say, no, you can't do that. They're employees. You have to treat them like employees. By which we mean give them employment benefits. You can't just say independent contractor, even though they're not independent contractors at all. They're not at all. They're employees. So yeah, I would love to see that happen, but no, I don't think that will happen. And you're right, it hasn't happened under Democratic or Republican presidents. I think a lot of it is just that people don't take pro wrestling seriously, and they don't think that it merits the attention of the government. I mean, nowadays, even most state athletic commissions don't really pay attention to wrestling shows, or at least they don't pay attention to WWE shows. Maybe they still give local promoters a hard time, but you know, most of the time, even the state athletic commission doesn't give a shit what the WWE does, and that used to at least be some semblance of oversight, even though most of those commissions were also corrupt and easily bribed, but at least there was some, you know, mechanism to keep them in line and have some government oversight. But yeah, I would love to see it happen, but I don't think it's gonna. And finally, last patron question from John Gingras. Hi, Steve. So LeVar Burton spilled the beans that Geordi is going to be in season 2 of Picard. I hope that he's a captain of his own ship, like we briefly see in that Voyager episode. What circumstances do you hope to see him in? Rank, job, marital status, etc. And what do you think he's been up to in the meantime? I know these questions are fun, but they're really difficult for me to answer because I always default to thinking about things as a writer. And I wonder, like, you know, it's difficult to say, well, here's what I want Geordi to be doing and here's what I want Geordi's position in life to be, because I don't know what story they're telling. I would hope that what happened was they were having a brainstorming session about, okay, what are we going to do for season 2? And they're sort of coming up with story ideas. And somebody said, oh, if we tell this story or we go in this direction, this might be a way we could get Geordi in here if we want to have Geordi in season 2. And then it went from there. It sort of grew from the story. As I suspect was probably why they decided to include Riker and 7 of 9 in season 1. I don't think anybody came into the writer's room and they had no story at all and they said, hey, let's put 7 of 9 in it, fuck it. I think they had some idea about telling stories involving the Borg, and they said, you know, if we're going to have Borg in it, we could maybe bring 7 into this. That might make some sense. So whatever story they're telling, that's hopefully what will determine what Geordi is doing and where he is and what his position in life is. So it's hard for me to speculate, like, because I get into that mindset of the writer, and it's like I don't know what the context will be. But I think that I would like to see him have advanced in rank and then maybe have left Starfleet. Like, I really like the idea that not everybody is still in Starfleet, especially for the TNG cast, because they were so frozen in the movies. Like, none of them advanced. None of them moved on to different assignments. They were all just on the Enterprise doing their regular jobs for, like, the entire show and the entire movie series. Even Worf. Like, Worf came back. You know, like, even though Worf left, Worf came back for the movies and just started doing the same job he was doing before. So I would like to see maybe Geordi having been promoted to captain. Maybe he served as captain of a ship for a few years and then he left Starfleet and now he's, maybe he's happily retired somewhere, or maybe he's working for some kind of a science organization, or teaching at an engineering school, or working on some kind of advanced warp design project or something. I think that would be a good place for Geordi to be, and just fighting off the babes with both hands. Like just, getting so much interest from the opposite sex that his social calendar is booked for the next 10 years because the babes just love Geordi. That's what I would like to see. All right, that was the last of the patron questions. So now let me turn to the live chat. Let me get the live chat up here on screen, and let me do this thing I have to do now because the live chat widget that I have necessitates that I make all of these adjustments to it so people can, read the text on screen. There, there we go. And I saw Leto Anor said, unionize babes. That is my number one wish for professional wrestlers, is for there to be a wrestlers union. I would be so happy if there was a wrestlers union. And that needs to happen yesterday. That is so ridiculously overdue for pro wrestlers to unionize. I would love to see that. And some random geek, you didn't frustrate me. You didn't annoy me. That's okay. I mean, it was frustrating. It was a little frustrating, but it's not like it didn't ruin my night or anything. I mean, please don't carry any guilt for that. Let me see here. Dark Lighter says, I'm personally holding out hope that season 2 will coincidentally be the Star Trek Galaxy pitch from Red Letter Media. I know it will never happen, but I can hope. I didn't watch that video, so I don't know what that pitch was. So I don't know if it was any good. Oh, and I just saw a super chat from John Gingras who said, about third party in the U.S., down ballot support is needed first. Vermont has a growing progressive party. It makes up about 8% of the Vermont House and Senate now. Plus, our lieutenant governor is progressive party. Change can happen. Yes, that is so important. It has to start from the ground up. And by the way, I see in my viewer activity here, Dark Lighter also sent me a super chat earlier before I was looking at the chat, saying thank you for everything you do. Patreon sub, incoming. Well, thank you very much for the super chat, for your generosity. I really, really appreciate that. Yeah, the Fermi paradox. Yes, 255 AD. Yes, I was kind of reaching for it in my head. I didn't mean the Drake equation. I meant the Fermi paradox. The Drake equation is a way to sort of estimate how many habitable worlds there might be. The Fermi paradox is why haven't we been contacted? Yes, thank you for that. Dr. Babylon says, I apologize for wasting your time with my vendetta against some random geek. I forgive you. It's okay. It was like I said. I mean, I look. I agree with a lot of what you say too, especially when it comes to your assessment of sort of radical leftist politics and anarchism in particular. There's, as I've said many times, I think their heart is in the right place. I share their goals. I share their dream of a society where everybody is free and equal, and there is a justice in society for everyone. I just don't know if their preferred method of achieving that is feasible. That's where I sort of jump off the train. Some random geek says, question, are you unionized? I am not a member of a union at the moment, I don't think. I almost joined. I've been thinking about joining the IWW, but I haven't yet. And I think I joined some kind of guild for YouTube creators, but it really doesn't do anything. Some random geek question, are individual rights and benefits for the collective mutually exclusive? I say not. Anarchists are for individual autonomy as well as encouraging mutual aid. They're not necessarily mutually exclusive. No, I wouldn't say that they are. Chris Dietrich, how deep is your love for Orange Cassidy? Boy, I love Orange Cassidy. It took me a little while to sort of get it. And I'll tell you what, because the first experience I had, and for people who don't know what the hell we're talking, Orange Cassidy is a wrestler. So this is wrestling shit. And Orange Cassidy's gimmick as a wrestler is that he is a great wrestler, but he's usually too lazy to actually try and do a good job in the matches. Right? He wrestles with his hands in his pockets, and he does like really lazy little kicks and lackadaisical shots, and and he's mostly a comedy wrestler. But what really sold me on Orange Cassidy was I saw his match from I think 2 years ago in for maybe last year for Beyond Wrestling with David Starr. And David Starr is this absolutely fucking amazing independent wrestler who is also like a leftist in terms of politics, and is always talking about progressive politics and leftist politics, and just seems like a really great guy and is a fantastic wrestler. And he had a match with Orange Cassidy, and they fucking tore the house down. It was one of the best independent matches I've seen in years. So, and that showed me Orange Cassidy is the real deal. That yeah, he's funny and he's got a cute little gimmick and he can do comedy matches and comedy spots and the deal with his hands in his pockets, and he does all kinds of really great spots where he takes his hands out and finds really creative ways of ending up with his hands back in his pockets or his sunglasses back on his face or whatever, and that's all great. But the dude can also wrestle and kick ass, and I thought that was great. So anybody who isn't quite sold on Orange Cassidy in terms of him being a genuine talent, go to YouTube and find that Beyond Wrestling match between him and David Starr, because it is fucking awesome. Daryl Lett says, Steve, are there categories of merchandise that are online or delivery from store to car only? Also, do you wear a mask when you go out? Tomorrow is 3 weeks and 15 work days that I've worn one at work. Yeah, I don't know about the... I know there are certain places now because of all this that will only do delivery or store to car. I don't know about categories of merchandise, but yeah, yeah. As of tomorrow, our governor here in Maryland issued an order where if you go to, basically, if you go to a store, if you go to a grocery store or someplace like that, that you have to wear a face mask. So we went grocery shopping today, and I did wear a face mask. And it'll be that way. It'll be mandatory here in Maryland for the foreseeable future, until this is over with. Leto Anor says, "Who the fuck names their child Orange?" And you know what's great? It's a gimmick name. It's not like his real name, but I don't have any idea where that comes from. I know because he dresses all in denim, right? He comes to the ring, he often has like a little bottle of orange juice with him. So he works orange juice into the gimmick somehow. But as to why he is called Orange Cassidy, I have no idea. Liam Foley says, per your influence, I'm finally watching Star Trek DS9, and I'm in the middle of season 3 and loving it. Well, I'm glad. Awesome. Yeah, season 3 is a good season. I'm glad. I'm glad I could influence you to watch it, and I'm glad you enjoy it. Some random geek earlier said, if the IWW or another organization creates an online video creator union, would you join and promote it? Yeah, if I could afford it. I mean, if I could afford the dues. Yeah, of course I would join it. Yeah. Jared Trish says it's because of his Trump-esque spray tan. Is he that tan? I don't think Orange Cassidy is all that tan, but maybe. I don't think so though. And I think he is. He did. Would you say he's a ginger or is he blonde? I'm trying to picture Orange. I think he's blonde. I don't think he's redheaded, but Oh, and 255 AD, thank you for the correction. I say Moray Ziller, and apparently it's Moray Zillar, Moray Ziar, or Moray Zillar. Have I said that enough times, and have I fucked it up every time? Chris Dietrich says, question, I'm a little late to this Q&A. Thoughts on WWE releases and who you think may get snatched by other orgs? I would be surprised if the Revival don't get signed at some point by AEW. I think they're probably close to a sure bet. As to the rest, I don't know. I mean, AEW doesn't, isn't going to be able to sign everybody. AEW, and nor should they. Just creatively speaking, they do one show a week and 4 pay-per-views a year, so they do not need to have a roster of 50 or 60 people. So not everybody's going to go to AEW, but I would be surprised if the Revival doesn't go there eventually, or doesn't go there relatively soon, I should say. And as for the releases, I mean, I think it sucks because I don't think the company needed to do that. I mean, if you look at the amount of money that they are saving by releasing all of those people, and not just wrestlers, but office people and road agents, and they released Mike Chioda, for Christ's sake, who was a referee who's been with them for like 25 or 30 years. They're saving $4 million, which is a lot of money to me and you, but is a tiny, tiny sliver of the WWE's operating budget. So they're really not saving all that much money. And on top of that, on the one hand, they're saying, hey, it's tough times. We have to cut back. All businesses have to make some sacrifices. Sorry. And they're cutting these people, sending them home, furloughing them, or in some cases just releasing them, basically firing them. But on the other hand, Vince McMahon is bragging about how good the company is doing in the midst of the pandemic and talking about how great their cash flow is despite all of these problems. So it's like they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. Oh, things are really bad. Sorry, we're going to have to let some people go. But don't worry, shareholders. Our company is still doing great. And we're still going to pay you your fucking stock dividend. And I mean, yeah, it's the releases for WWE really suck. And it really shows, just in case nobody has gotten the memo yet, that WWE is a shitty company run by shitty people. And they don't care about their employees. They certainly don't care about their wrestlers, and they don't care about any of their employees, apparently. Yeah, it sucks. It sucks. But I think I would bet the Revival winds up in AEW before too long. Secular Scholar says, instead of saying he's not Trump, can you steel man Biden? Yeah, I actually think if you can, again, if you can hold your nose and avert your eyes and see past the Tara Reid allegations, which, again, I don't think they should be dismissed or soft-pedaled. I think that's very serious. And if somebody says they can't vote for Biden because of that, I completely respect that. But yeah, look, I think his proposals for improving the Affordable Care Act would be better than what we have. I don't think it's what we should have, but I think it's an improvement on what we do have. I think his proposals for making college more affordable for people are great. I think, he doesn't go as far on climate change as I would like to see us go, but he wants to rejoin the Paris Accords. I think his immigration policy would be an improvement. I think his proposals in terms of criminal justice reform are fairly timid, but again, they are better than what we have now, and they are certainly better than what Trump would do given 4 more years. He is a moderate Democrat candidate. And compared to a real fearless go-for-broke progressive, he's a disappointment. But compared to any Republican, not just Trump, but any Republican, it's vastly preferable. It's still progress. It's still positive change. It's just a lot slower and a lot more tentative than we really should be doing. But that doesn't mean that it's bad. It's just not nearly as good as I would like it to be. So that would be my positive case for Biden. In terms of policy, in terms of platform, in terms of what he wants to accomplish, it's all good stuff. It's just not as far as I think we need to be going in the year 2020 in the United States of America. But it still would move us forward. So that's what I would say. Oh, Carlisle the Cinephile. So you're a Jedi. Cool. What color is your lightsaber? Probably green. I always dug Luke's green lightsaber from Jedi. I would go with green. And plus, green was my first favorite color because my dad had a green truck when I was a kid, and I loved the green truck. And green was like my favorite color, so I would want a green lightsaber probably. And I know the colors mean shit, but I have no idea what they mean, so I don't know what a green lightsaber says about me. I would just pick it because I like the color. 255 AD says, I know you're not, but I'm really morally opposed to Christie's stance on the Biden accusations, the accusations against Biden. Am I honor bound to ask her to unmod me if I feel that way? I don't. That's up to you. I don't know. I'm not going to say it. If it's your sense of honor, I can't tell you what what you should do. Line Havid, favorite character in Voyager. Favorite character in Voyager. I guess the Doctor. Either the Doctor or Seven, probably. Leto Anor, that's the shittiest steel manning ever. Well, it's off the top of my head. I'm sorry. I could probably, I could go through Biden's website and pick out all of the policies and come up with really great arguments in favor. But just off the top of my head, it's the best I could do. Andrew Michael, quick, name the 5 greatest episodes of Voyager. I dare you. Off the top of my head? I can't even think of 5 episodes of Voyager off the top of my head. Okay. The Thaw. Death Wish. 3 other ones. I don't know. It's the one, I don't know. I can't even, it's not a very memorable show. I can't even think of 5 episodes that, I'm sure there are 5 really good episodes. X-Files green glow. Yes, for my lightsaber. Yes, very, very, very much so. Yes. Yeah, Surrender Geek, I saw your message earlier about the tiers of IWW. Yeah, I think I looked at the lower tier when I was thinking about joining it earlier last year, but I just kind of got away from. Maybe I'll go back and look at it again. The meanings of lightsaber colors change depending on the needs of the story. It doesn't really make a difference. Okay, well, good then. Some random geek, isn't this current system of governance just bribery? No. It unfortunately it allows for that, or it makes that sort of behavior easy to do and get away with. But I don't think it's not inherently bribery. No. Carlisle Cinephile, say you're made a writer on season 2 of Picard. Where do you take the story? I would like to delve into Picard's experience now as in his current life. And I don't want to spoil too much for people who haven't seen the show yet, although I've spoiled it freely in previous live streams. But where Picard finds himself at the very end of season 1. I suspect they're probably going to just say, okay, everything's back to normal now, and they'll just go ahead and tell stories that don't deal with that. But I would like to see at least some time spent developing what his life is like now in his current state, how it's different, how it's the same, that sort of thing. I don't know. You couldn't do like a whole season just about the existential questions of Picard's existence, but I would like to see some acknowledgement of that. As for storyline, I don't know. Well, you got to have something for Geordi to do. You got to have something for Guinan to do. I don't know. I really have no idea. Maybe that's like surprising or disappointing to people. I really have no idea. Like what I would set up 7 of 9 for her inevitable solo spinoff. Secular Scholar, would you be a single saber, dual sabers, or saber staff? Single saber. Dark Lighter, what do you think of the near wordless scene between Troy and Picard in episode 6? I consider it one of the best examples of show don't tell of all time. Yeah, oh, it's a great scene. Yeah, all of Troy and Picard's stuff in that episode is great. I think, and to see how well Troy was written in that episode and how well Marina Sirtis did, really, it makes it even more of a shame that they didn't do more with Troy as a character during TNG and during the movies, because obviously there was a character there and there was an actor there capable of doing more than she was given to do. So yeah, Troy's stuff in Nepenthe was fantastic. John Gingras, best Voyager episode, the one where Tom Paris has the exact skill knowledge needed to save the day. You're damn right. Tom Paris, the Swiss Army knife of Starfleet officers, the most proficient and effective Starfleet officer ever. And he's the low-ranking officer who drives the ship, and he never gets promoted, and he never gets recognized for anything. John Brockman, I could do 10 seasons on Picard's existential shit. 15 seasons of Picard drinking wine and talking about identity in the Borg. You know what? How about Picard just goes back to the vineyard and the next season doesn't even take place in space? It's just him solving crimes, like it's just Murder, She Wrote. Right? Just do that. Yeah, exactly. Dark Lighter, halfway through that scene, I was like, oh shit, I forgot she's a telepath. Exactly. Where one of my favorite moments of that whole season, and especially of that episode, is when Picard first walks up to her and she hugs him and she just intuitively says, you're in trouble. How bad is it? And it's like, yes, that's how she should always have been written. And they don't underline it. Picard doesn't say, oh, did you sense something, Deanna? Right? We just get it. Because she's smart, and she has this ability, and she uses it. And Picard knows that she has that ability, and it just passes between them. And they're old friends, and they know each other. And it was so well done. Matthew Datcher, murder he engaged. Oh, perfect. Murder he logged. Detectives log, stardate 4157, whatever. That will be back in the first season. Yeah, Leto, I would totally watch a Picard murder series too. Totally. Some random geek. What about the Voyager episode where the crew turned into newts? Yeah, I mean, that's a bad episode. It's not as bad, I think, as its reputation suggests, but it's a bad episode. Like people promote that as or nominate that as like the worst episode of any Star Trek show ever. I don't think it's anywhere close to that. It's a bad episode. Yeah, that's true. Nihilus Kriak, Paris got promoted after being demoted. Right. He got demoted for because that was the week that Janeway decided she was really who broke the Prime Directive. And she was like, you're going into the brig for 30 days and you're being reduced in rank. And then, like, was it later that same season they booted him right back up to Lieutenant JG again? Yeah. And he was still like Lieutenant JG. Like, that's not even... He's Tom Paris. He broke the Warp 10 barrier. Like, he's a fucking junior grade lieutenant at the end of the series. He never got promoted to full lieutenant, did he? Or did he finally get promoted to full lieutenant? I can't remember, but yeah, it's fucking ridiculous. Sci-Fi 2285, my favorite Troy moment from TNG is when she loses her powers and everybody starts treating her like they always should have. Yeah. That's a good episode, but it's one of those episodes where it seems like TNG is trying to make some sort of statement about people with disabilities, and it doesn't quite come out right, which I think happens a lot when Star Trek tries to deal with disability. Liam Foley, I've seen some Trek fans claim that in the episode The Inner Light, Picard was violated, mind raped in that episode. Thoughts? I've never thought of that, but yeah, I can kind of see I can see how you could make that argument, because the probe doesn't ask for his consent. The probe doesn't contact the Enterprise first and say, hey, I've got this gimmick I can do where you live an entire lifetime as a member of this alien race. Anybody up for it? it just, sort of zaps Picard and boom. So yeah, I think that's a valid critique of that episode. Some random geek, worst episode of the entire Star Trek franchise, or is it just Code of Arms? I think you mean Code of Honor. Yeah, I would say that. I would say Code of Honor is the worst, because not only is it a shitty episode in terms of its story, it's just a bad episode, but it's also super, super racist, and there's just absolutely no excuse for it. Yeah, I would say my pick for worst episode of the whole franchise would be Code of Honor, definitely. Yeah, Leto Anor, when every show tries to deal with disability. It does seem to be a very challenging topic, probably because most of the writers and producers are non-disabled people. If there were more people with disabilities who had those lived experiences, who actually had input into writing and producing shows, presumably it would be less of a problem. Or at least there would be more of a diversity of perspective, which would help. But yeah, it seems to be a problem no matter what show, but yeah. 255 AD says, to be fair, Tom was a criminal twice over. Like when he got demoted, it was because he tried to blow up an alien power plant. Yeah, but for a good reason. Like Star Trek people have tried to have broken the rules for good reasons before, and they didn't get punished for it. Like think about Captain Sisko. Captain Sisko was an accessory to murder and conspiracy, in the pale moonlight. Granted, it was for, but that's the point I was trying to get at. It was for a good reason, right? He was trying to trick the Romulans into joining the war against the Dominion. And Starfleet didn't demote him. They approved his plan. They said, you go, Captain Sisko. Trick those Romulans. And yeah, if you need to kill a few people, whatever, go ahead. So yeah. On the topic of some of the side characters not getting fleshed out in Picard Season 1, I really want to like Elnor, but what is there to write when he just lived and trained with the Kawat Mulatto and Vashti? Well, yeah, you have to develop his character going forward. I think the problem with Elnor wasn't his backstory. The problem was that once they got him on the ship with the rest of the crew, he was kind of like he was like, oh, he's the naive guy. And that's really all they had time to do with him. He's the naive guy, and he looks at Picard as a father figure, and he's wounded because Picard was gone for so long, but eventually he is able to let that go and embrace Picard again. Like that was basically Elnor's story. So hopefully they give him more to do in terms of story in Season 2. I would also... I would like to see more of the Romulan housekeepers. Well, I know. Oh, what are their fucking names? I can never remember their names. Laris and the other one. I can never remember their fucking names because after like episode 3, they vanish. But I would like to see more of them as well. 255 AD says, question, Biden claims he's only planning to serve one term. Do you think he'd go back on that if it seems someone too left might get the nom in 2020? Maybe, but I mean, the main reason why Biden has said he only wants to do one term is because of his age, and he wants to sort of put people at ease and say, look, I'm only going to be here for 4 years. So don't worry about voting for, someone my age. And I mean, that's not going to change whether the presumptive nominee is far left or whatever. I don't think that would make a difference. Yes, Zhaban. Yes, I remembered Laris this time, but I forgot Zhaban. Yes. Zhaban is the other Romulan member of Picard's staff. I would like to see more from them. Thank you for my last attempt at pronouncing Murazier. Is that close? Yeah. One, two, three, four. Tom H. Steve ran back to your tour bus, smoked marijuana with Stuffy and Willie Nelson. This is quite a fantasy you've got concocted here in the chat. This is really, it's like alternate universe fanfic. If I were a musician, it's interesting. Some random geek says, who should Biden pick as a running mate? It would not upset me if he picked Warren. I don't think he's going to pick Warren, but it would not break my heart, obviously, if he picked Elizabeth Warren. I would say maybe Kamala Harris, but I think there are probably enough people on Biden's campaign that are smart enough to know that if he picked Harris, that would really, really piss off the progressive wing of the party. And they're already on thin ice, or Biden is already on thin ice with them as it is. So I don't think he'll pick Harris either. Maybe he will pick Stacey Abrams. I mean, a lot of people are saying that he might pick Stacey Abrams. That would be great. Maybe he will. I don't know. Liam Foley says, do you think this country is more center-left than progressive, and that bodes well for Biden? Yes, I do think it is more center-left. I don't think, the evidence I would cite for that is that Bernie Sanders has failed 2 election cycles in a row to get anywhere close to the Democratic nomination. If the people of the United States were as progressive as I kind of wish they were, I think Bernie Sanders would probably have won the nomination in 2016 and would have won the presidency. But he didn't. And like I said earlier, he didn't really, I mean, he gave Hillary a decent run for it, but he never really got close to winning the nomination. And didn't this time either. So yeah, I think we are much more of a center-left nation than a progressive. I wish we were more progressive as a people, as a culture, but we're not. But I do think we're more center-left. And yes, I do think that bodes well for Biden, obviously, because he's not as progressive as he is center-left. Dr. Babylon says, there's a part of me I'm ashamed of that's hoping Joe Biden dies of the coronavirus. I don't like that I feel this way. Yeah, it's kind of dark. I don't, not just hoping that he dies, but that he dies of the coronavirus. Yeah, that'll teach you. That's a little dark. I was wrong. Sorry, 255AD, that was wrong again. Well, I don't know. Danny Lajal, Best Voyager Episode 2 Vix. That is a controversial statement, my friend. That is a controversial statement. Jared Trish, AOC for VP. I do not think AOC is eligible. You have to be eligible to serve as the president before you can be eligible to serve as VP. And she is not old enough to serve as president, so I don't think she would be constitutionally able to be VP yet. 255 AD says, do the Democrats care about winning as much as they care about preserving neoliberalism? Well, the problem is I think they see them as the same thing. That's the problem. I think they see pursuing the agenda that they are pursuing as the pragmatic path to winning the election. I don't think they're choosing one over the other. I don't think they're saying we would rather promote this view of government, this philosophy of government, even if it means we don't win. I think they see it as that's how we win, So I think they see it as they are promoting a neoliberal agenda because that's the way to win the election. Some random geek. I don't think we are a far right country. Not in total. No, I don't think we are. I mean, I think we have, obviously there are institutions that are far right, and the far right and the right in general is allowed way more, a very outsized amount of influence on the political discourse and popular discourse. But if you were to take a survey of political beliefs of just citizens in the country, I don't think we would be a far right country. I don't think we would be a far left country either. I think center left is probably pretty close. And now in terms of our foreign policy, in terms of how the government governs, I mean, depending on what you mean by country, you could make an argument that we're more to the right than to the left. But in terms of the political views of the populace, I don't think we're far right. we're more to the right than I would like us to be. We're closer to the right than I would like us to be. But I don't think it will be fair to say that the United States is a far right country. Liam Foley, I have not watched Schitt's Creek. I have thought about it. I have wanted to, and now that the series is complete, I might actually try to sit down and watch it, but I have not watched it yet. No. Christy, I don't remember when I gave you a wrench, but it was you've been a mod for a while. I can't remember when, but you've been a mod for a while. At least the last several times when you've come to the chat. I can't remember. Yeah, I know. Internationally, the U.S. is far right in terms of especially in terms of Europe. But that's a little bit like saying, well, comparing, how fast somebody is as a base runner to how fast somebody is as an Olympic sprinter. Like, it's two different contexts, and I'm accustomed to the American context of what constitutes far right and far left. So that's kind of what I go with. If someone from another country wants to say that by our standards the United States is far right, then that's their judgment to make, and I have no grounds to dispute that. The Harry 1863, do you think Joe Biden will be able to repair America's international image? Yeah, I think so. I mean, given how bad it is under the current administration, it won't really be all that difficult. Yeah, I think so. Steve could be our first atheist president. Yeah, I'm never going to run, though. I'm never going to run. Lato Anwar says Americans think not letting people die of poverty is socialism. Yeah, that's a good point. I still don't. Maybe center right. Center right is more reasonable than far right. But I don't know. I would question how many if you put the question to Americans and you phrased it that way and you said, do you think we should have programs that prevent people from dying in poverty or dying as a result of living in poverty? I think most people would say that they are not in favor of people dying in poverty, and it's possible to alleviate poverty without going full anti-capitalist. Now, I'm not saying, I didn't say it's possible to eliminate poverty, but it's possible to greatly alleviate it, and to prevent people from dying as a result of it. And I think a lot of Americans would be in favor of that if you put the question to them in that way. Now, is there a lot of unthinking support for structures that exacerbate poverty? Yeah, completely. I completely agree with you there. Robert Mills, have you seen the Americanization of Emily? No, I have not. Liam Foley, do you think Trump supporters are totally lost? What will it take to wake them up? Yes, and I have no idea. I think people today, and I've thought this for the last several years, ever since Trump became president and it became obvious what a shitty president he was going to be, I have thought that anyone who still supports Trump after all this, I have no idea what anyone could say or do to convince them that they should not support Trump. Like, if you are watching what Donald Trump is doing and you still think, yeah, he's my guy, I don't know what to tell you. So I don't think we should be wasting time trying to turn them. I think we should be reaching out to other people who maybe could benefit from a conversation and could be persuaded to vote another way. But people who are serious, avowed Trump supporters now still, they're just write them off. Just write them off. It's a waste of your time. Dr. Babylon says, if we won't vote for a socialist president, maybe this is the economic system we deserve. Yeah, maybe. Boy, you're in kind of a cynical mood tonight, aren't you? Maybe, yeah. I don't know, but yeah, as Leto points out, technically, I mean, even Bernie himself doesn't call himself a socialist. He calls himself a democratic socialist, which basically means he's a Democrat with socialist leanings, with socialist tendencies, or left leaning tendencies, or progressive tendencies. But technically, he is not a socialist. I think most of the policies, and honestly, and Leto and I have talked about this before, and some random geek as well. Most of the things that Americans think of as socialist are we need a different word for it. We need to call it something else, like socialistic, or socialist-esque, or socialist adjacent, something like that, because technically it's not, in terms of what a proper socialist would call socialism. It's not really socialism. It's capitalism with a very, very robust welfare state. Max Fly says, Red Letter Media hated Picard so much they brought Mr. Plinkett out of Mothballs to trash it. Yeah, I'm probably not going to watch that. I really liked the I liked the Plinkett reviews, especially the Star Trek and the Star Wars stuff. But lately, actually, there's a veiled swipe at Red Letter Media in the script for my next Trek Actually video, and I went back and rewrote it, because originally it was a lot more overt. It was a lot more like, of a sort of insult directed at Red Letter Media, and I sort of pulled back because I thought, nah, that's kind of catty. I don't want to do that. So there's a veiled, sort of vague, indirect insult directed at Red Letter Media in the script for the next Trek Actually video, but that's about it. But I'm not a big fan of theirs anymore, because it just seems, their stuff seems so joyless, and it seems like they're just pandering to this audience of angry reactionaries, and it's like they're entitled to their opinions, and if they really, really hate the new Star Trek that much, they're entitled to feel that way about it. But I mean, it's just no fun to watch. And I don't really think that their critiques are as sharp or as interesting as they used to be. So I don't really watch them anymore. And it's a shame, because years ago, I thought their stuff was really funny and really insightful. Now it just seems like some old fans who are set in their ways and think that things ought to be this way, but because they're this way, they don't like it, and they're just going to piss all over it. And it just doesn't appeal to me anymore. 255 AD says, sometimes I feel like progressive beliefs aren't real or substantial because I come from a conservative family. Does that make sense? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally. Yeah, because you're raised to have certain underlying assumptions about how things work, or how things have to work, and it's hard to shake that. And when you get progressive ideals that operate under different assumptions, yeah, I completely get that. David Colby says RLM's review of First Contact is actually really crappy now that I'm old enough to realize all their critiques are actually really kind of not intelligent. I would have to go back and watch it. I haven't watched it for a few years. I do remember them, the First Contact one, they weren't saying that it was a bad movie. They were just sort of nitpicking it, and I thought it was funny. But I'll have to go back and watch it again. I mean, First Contact is not a bad movie. First Contact is a pretty good movie. I think one of the reasons why the Star Trek, the Star Wars prequels reviews were what actually blew them up and really hit huge for them, was because they were tapping into a dissatisfaction with the movies that existed. Whereas with Star Trek, with all the Star Trek movies in general, really, but with First Contact in particular, like, most people like First Contact. So a video critiquing it and talking about why that movie sucks isn't really going to get much traction, because most people like it. And even the critique of like a shitty Star Trek movie like Nemesis, it's not really going to get that much traction because nobody gave a fuck about Nemesis. It wasn't like a cultural event, whereas the prequels were this big cultural event that dissatisfied a lot of people. So, it made sense for that. Anyway, okay, I've been going for almost 2 hours now, so I am going to wrap this up. Lato Andrew says Star Trek men whining at a first season being imperfect. Yeah, I know. Whoever heard of a first season of a show not being, having certain flaws, especially a Star Trek show? Whoever heard of such a thing? But yeah, so anyway, I'm going to draw this to a close now. Thank you all so much for joining me for this. I want to draw your attention, as I always do, to the charity links below. If you can possibly help out some of our friends who need a helping hand, please do so. They're all linked in the description of this video. And if you can't afford to help financially, and consider sharing the links around to your friends on social media, because that would be really, really appreciated as well. Okay, one more question from Caroline Clark I see in the live chat. Do you think there will ever come a time when conservatives and Democrats will ever get along again? Yeah, possibly. We have very short memories in the United States. I think we will. There will be a time when the two sides will be more amicable, because we'll forget about the Trump thing. Whether we shouldn't, but we will. I think that'll happen again. I also want to remind everybody, my Patreon link is right there, patreon.com/Steve Shives. Patreon, and your support through Patreon is what allows me to do this. So I thank you all so much for being patrons. Those of you who are, being a patron at any level gives you the opportunity to submit questions early for Ask Away live streams. The Monday before an Ask Away, I will put up a post on my Patreon page that is patrons only, and you can leave a comment on that page and ask your question for that week's episode of Ask Away. So take advantage of that if you want to support the channel and make sure you get your question answered, and not take a chance that I won't see it in the live chat during the show. And $5 pledges or more per month get you shout outs at the end of the Facepalm 5 and a new Trek Actually video. So consider that if you want to support me and help me continue to do the work that I'm doing. Also, don't forget that I co-host a couple of podcasts. The Let Me Listen podcast family is where you can find them, LetMeListenPodcast.com. I co-host Late Seating, which is a movie review podcast, and also The Ensign's Log, which is a Star Trek-themed comedy podcast where Jason Harding and I portray low-ranking officers serving aboard a certain famous Federation starship as it embarks on a certain legendary 5-year mission. Our new episode, the second episode of our third season, just dropped today. It's a great episode, if I do say so myself. It was so goddamn much fun to record, and it really turned out well. So listen to the new episode of the Ensign's Log if you haven't already. Go back and listen to all of the previous episodes of the Ensign's Log if you haven't given the show a chance yet. If you like my Star Trek stuff here on YouTube, I think you'll really, really dig the Ensign's Log. So give that a shot if you would. If you have not yet. Thank you all so very much for watching. Have a good weekend. Please take care of yourselves. Please be safe with the continuing pandemic and having to self-quarantine and all of this. Take whatever precautions are necessary to keep you and yours safe and free from infection. And I will see you next week for regularly scheduled videos. And I'll see you in 2 weeks for some more live streams. And until then, just please take care and be safe, everybody. Thank you all so much for everything, and I'll see you later.